Welcome to Edge Unscripted. Listen along for candid conversations with the Edge marketing team on a variety of subjects in the world of PR and marketing and other topics that have our attention. Let's go off script.
What if the biggest threat to your current marketing message isn't a competitor? What if it's a PDF that your company published 4 years ago and completely forgot about? Welcome to Edge Unscripted, the podcast from Edge Marketing, where we explore the trends, challenges, and ideas shaping marketing and communications across legal, accounting, technology, compliance, and other regulated industries. I'm Jennifer Marsnik with Edge Marketing. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Cindy Moen, who recently authored a new article titled Content Debt, the Marketing Risk Hiding in Plain Sight. Cindy's article looks at what happens when outdated web pages, brochures, company descriptions, executive biographies, and other forgotten materials continue representing an organization long after the messaging has changed. We'll talk about how content debt builds, why AI is raising the stakes about what marketing teams can do about it without launching a year-long audit involving 17 spreadsheets. Cindy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm glad to be here.
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. I can't believe summer's almost over. It's silly.
I know. Here we are. It's almost ILTACon time.
I know, which is an exciting time of the year too. I have to tell you, I loved this article so much because I think it addresses a problem that we don't talk about a lot. And in fact, it brought me back, not really in a nostalgia way, maybe in a PTSD kind of way, to my life about 30 years ago. I'm really dating myself here, but remember when we used to just print brochures as it was a common marketing thing. And of course, sometimes that is still a channel and asset that we use, but I worked for a company that had field offices all over the country, and we would, of course, produce new sales collateral from time to time. And I remember going into an office and seeing stacks of brochures that were 3 or 4 iterations ago that were still actively being used. And so just this whole idea of content debt, what it really is, it is not a new thing brought on by the digital world. It's something marketers have really been dealing with in one form or another for a long time.
That's absolutely right. Yep. And I have the shared PTSD from that, Jennifer.
All right, so let's dive in and talk about your article. I think let's start with the term itself. What do you mean by content debt?
It's the outdated, duplicative, forgotten content that a company's accumulated over time. It's still out there. It represents the brand. It might be like an old web page, a PDF, or a company description on a third-party site like a directory listing.
So what kind of materials tend to create the most content debt, would you say?
Yeah, PDFs are a really big one because they're super easy to publish and they are just as easy to forget about. Like old brochures, white papers, product sheets, some of the things you're just talking about, press releases, campaign landing page, they can hang around for years. I think companies should also look for like executive bios, company descriptions, directory listings, old website pages.
Yeah, the bios I think are an interesting one because they do evolve over time and they're usually pretty neglected.
Yeah.
A lot of those channels.
How many bios out there say you have 20 years of experience when you actually have 30?
Right? I mean that's an easy fix. But why do you think we often fail to notice that the problem is even growing?
Yeah. I think marketing teams are really focused on creating the next thing, not cleaning up the last thing. There's always a new campaign. There's always a new website that needs to be created. There's articles. We got an event coming up. We got an announcement. All of that feels more urgent. And once something disappears from your own day-to-day view, it's easy to forget that it may not have disappeared from other people's view. So unfortunately, the internet kind of has a long memory. So an AI AI is making that even more important because it can find and use the content your own marketing team may have just completely forgotten that it exists.
Yeah, and I mean, not even just forgetting about it, but then prioritizing the dealing with it. It's not a revenue generating activity like we try to focus, like you said, it's not urgent, I guess, and that's probably one of the main reasons we tend to prioritize the things that product launches or whatever is the today's task that's going to
That's
help with the revenue generation, right?
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
So let's talk some more about kind of how it comes to be. Content debt doesn't usually arrive with flashing lights and alarms. It builds more quietly. Let's talk about when you recognize the problem kind of clearly in some of your own work. Your article begins with the example of a tech company that you were helping prepare for a website relaunch, I think.
Yeah.
Tell us what happened during that project.
Yeah, that one started as a fairly simple project. It was to build a more modern, a more secure website that accurately reflected the company positioning. And we wanted to more urgently optimize it for both SEO and AEO. One big challenge that we encountered was that we decided to change the URL for good or for bad. And what happened is there were old URLs out there that were linked to old campaign landing pages that somehow didn't get detected when we were redirecting, and people were still able to get to those pages. I don't know how, but they were finding these ancient pages out there.
Wow. I mean, I think that, yeah, that's really the crux of the problem, right? It's like you don't even know what's out there.
Hmm.
What what did you find? What kinds of older conflicting materials were still circulating?
Yeah. Older company descriptions, and interestingly, found those in a few different places and conflicting, like LinkedIn, directory listings, like the Microsoft Partner Center. So there's a bunch of different places. But the product
Yeah.
language had changed. There were downloadable documents, legacy web pages, like I just mentioned, campaign materials that were all just kind of had different points in the company's evolution. And I think that's pretty normal. Companies change, right? Products evolve, messaging improves, and um, the the problem is that the material just doesn't disappear when new strategy arrives.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, companies do change and products, and they should, right? I mean, nobody wants to be stale, but I think there's just a whole element of keeping up with it that gets neglected. So why can a website relaunch create like a false sense that the messaging problem has been solved or addressed?
Yeah. I think it's because the website feels like the center of the universe when you're working on it. I mean, it's such a big project, right? You spend months getting every headline and paragraph right. You launch the site and then you think, great, now the market sees us exactly the way we need to be seen.
God, isn't
Um,
that so true? Oh my gosh.
Except your audience isn't only seeing that new site, they may be finding an old brochure, like we talked about, a press release, a partner page, directory listing, and it's telling a different story. So the website relaunch can solve the current website problem, but it doesn't automatically solve the rest of your digital history.
Yeah. Wow, that's so true. And that disconnect would be confusing enough if people were simply clicking through a few old links, right? But I guess AI just really changes the equation even more.
It really
So,
does.
yeah, so let's talk about that. How does AI make content debt more consequential, I guess, than it was a few years ago?
Well, because it doesn't just point people towards information, it synthesizes the information for them.
Right.
You, you know, a few years ago, if somebody Googled your company, they'd get a list of links and just click. But today with AI tools, they're pulling from your website, an old PDF, a forgotten landing page, directory listing, and then they combine all of that into one answer. And that means that outdated content can become part of the story that AI tells about your company, even if your marketing team stopped using that language a year ago. So that's what raises the stakes. You're no longer just managing what people find, you're managing what machines may interpret. and they combine it and they repeat it about you.
Yeah, isn't that something? It's not even the audience of human beings that we
Yeah,
have to worry about today. AI has really become an important constituency or audience that we need to think about in kind of everything you're doing as a
yeah,
marketer.
yeah, that's right.
Okay, so Cindy, your article cites an analysis of 270 major brands in which it says, and I couldn't believe this, only 3% achieved a leading level of AI readiness. That was very interesting to me. What does that finding tell you?
Yeah. I think it tells us that even very sophisticated organizations like we're talking about Apple with big marketing teams and significant resources are struggling with this. The important point is that having a great website is not enough. Your organization has this much larger digital footprint made up of web pages, PDFs, press releases, third-party listings, and years of accumulated content. If major brands are having trouble making all of that information easy for AI to understand, smaller organizations shouldn't assume they've got it covered either.
Yeah.
To me, it means like the finding is like a wake-up call. AI readiness is about two things, creating new content for AI and cleaning up and managing the old content.
Yeah, I think, your point, those organizations, you think of them, and in my head, I always assume the huge companies with the big teams and the big budgets, that they just magically have it all figured out. And seeing this or talking about this makes me makes me feel a little bit better, especially for all the smaller and mid-sized companies out there that are working hard to
For
keep up with
sure.
it. Like, you don't have to feel like you're that far behind, because companies you think might have a handle on it all really don't.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and you talked about how AI readiness isn't just about creating content for AI, but cleaning up and managing what you already have. That brings me to what I think is a common instinct by a lot of people, marketers and maybe non-marketers alike. When organizations want to improve visibility, there's a tendency to respond by creating more content.
Right.
So why doesn't publishing new content just automatically solve the problem?
Yeah, like waving a magic wand, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't disappear. You can create a new article, you can update your messaging, you can launch a new website, but if the older material is still online, it'll continue showing up in search results. So all of that ends up in your AI answers. So that's kind of the heart of the content debt. New content adds another layer, but it doesn't clean up what came before it. So in some cases, it can even mean making the problem worse because now you have two or three different versions of the same story out there. So content strategy can't just be about creation. It has to include maintenance, has to include consolidation, and sometimes just knowing when to retire things.
Yeah. So on that note, how does the constant pressure to produce new content contribute to content debt?
Yeah. I think we're, as marketing teams, are almost always focused on what comes next. There's a new article to write, a new campaign to launch, there's an event coming up, and they all need something yesterday. Creating new content is visible. It feels super productive. Like you said before, it can be potentially revenue generating. So going back through 3 years of PDF and old landing pages doesn't really have the same appeal. So we keep adding new layers without always cleaning up what came before. And because there's rarely a single moment when content becomes bad, the debt just builds. One outdated brochure doesn't seem urgent. Neither does one old bio. Then one day you realize you have 5 versions of the same message, 5 versions of the same bio, and they're all floating around out there. The irony to me is that sometimes the smartest content strategy isn't really creating something new, but cleaning up what you already have.
Oh my gosh, that's so on point. And I, what I think about, Cindy, having done what we do for a long time, it's really one of the non-glamorous parts. I think people who don't work in this field have this idea about what marketing is or what marketers might do or whatever, and the fun design. But I mean, there's so many things that we have to do that should be priorities that are not glamorous at all, right?
That's
And
right.
this is really one of them. And just telling a busy marketing team, of course, because everyone is busy, we're all trying to do more with less, things more efficient, what have you, but telling a team to just audit everything it's ever published isn't particularly helpful. So where do you think, where should an organization start if it suspects it has a content debt problem, which frankly, I think any organization that's been around for more than a couple of years probably has at least the startings of a content debt problem. So how do you think they should get started in dealing with it?
Yeah, I'd start small and look at the places most likely to shape how people understand the organization. Like we've already mentioned, like LinkedIn and directory listings and your website. And I would recommend that you search for your company in a different mindset. You search the way a buyer might be looking for you, the way a journalist, if that's important to you, might be looking for you, or like a partner would. And don't just look at the homepage. Look for everything. Look for old PDFs, look for old descriptions, look for landing pages, directory listings, anything that is still publicly accessible out there. And then pick your most important messages, like what you do, who you serve, what makes you different, and compare how those messages appear across the website and all your other materials. I don't think you need to audit everything at once. The goal, I think, is to find the places where the old content is creating confusion or contradicting the story you want to tell today.
Yeah. So which claims should teams compare across their digital footprint? You kind of touched on that a little, but
Yeah. I'd compare the claims that define how you want to make the market understand you. It starts with the basics that I just mentioned, but I'd also look at things like geographic reach, industry expertise, security or compliance claims, and how you talk about AI. I think the important thing is consistency. If your homepage says one thing, a PDF says something slightly different, and a third-party profile is using language from 4 years ago, that creates uncertainty. And you don't need every sentence to be identical, but the core story should line up whenever somebody finds information on the company.
yeah. And so once the team finds all this material, the next question is, what do you do with it?
Yeah.
I love this piece of your article because I love practical takeaways. You recommend placing content into 4 categories: keep, update, consolidate or redirect, and retire. Can you walk us through those?
Yes. I'd keep it really simple. So keep
Yeah.
means the content is still accurate, it's still useful, it's aligned with how you want to present the company today. Update means the asset still has value, but something in it needs to change, like the messaging, maybe there's new data, new branding, updated links, or maybe you've changed how you describe a product or service. Consolidate or redirect is for situations where you've got multiple pieces saying basically the same thing. Instead of making people or search engines choose among them, you create one stronger source and then point the others there. Um, Retire is for content that's outdated, it's misleading, or it's just not useful. You just want to thank it for providing service and then send it out the door.
Yeah.
I think that the point of these 4 categories, though, is just make it the audit actionable. You're not creating an inventory, but you're deciding like what happens next.
Yeah, I like that. And I mean, I think that's really useful. It's fairly self-explanatory and pretty intuitive. You just have to think about it, make a point about it, make a point to focus on it. Um, let's talk for a minute specifically though about PDFs.
Yeah,
Why do they deserve special attention in this exercise?
yeah. I think, and tell me if you think differently, but PDFs are incredibly easy to publish and they're incredibly easy to forget.
Sure.
I mean,
Totally agree.
yeah, you might replace a brochure, a white paper, a sales sheet internally, but the old PDF might be sitting in somebody's drive somewhere. It could be sitting on the website. It could be linked from an old campaign. It's could be indexed by search engines or referenced somewhere else online. And unlike your web page, a PDF isn't usually something teams think to revisit every time the messaging changes. So that makes the PDFs the perfect little time capsule of yesterday's positioning. And unfortunately, buyers and AI tools may still find them.
Yeah. It's like the stack of old brochures in the closet, right?
Sure is.
Like it's totally what I'm thinking about. One of my favorite pieces that we would publish was an annual report when you work for a publicly held company because it's dated and you always know whether or not you're using the correct one, right? But
That's
some of
right.
these just don't have that luxury with everything. So going through a cleanup exercise is certainly a smart place to start and will likely help, but it doesn't prevent content from coming back.
Yeah.
So I think that's just kind of an important thing to keep in mind that this is probably like a life cycle thing, right? It's an ongoing process. You don't just do, it's not just a one and done kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
All right. So let's take a step back from the audit itself and look at what this means for an organization's brand. I think for companies or firms or whoever, we often think of brand messaging as the language on a current website. But why is that definition too narrow?
Yeah. Your website is just one piece of your brand's digital footprint. People might encounter you through all these other things we've been talking about: PDFs, press releases, bios, directory listings, partner websites, social profiles before they ever reach your homepage. And how AI tools are pulling all of those together, like that just, that matters in your digital footprint. So you can spend months perfecting the messaging on your website and still have an old brochure from 2022 telling a completely different story somewhere else. I think us marketers, we need to broaden the way we think about brand management. Your brand isn't just what you're saying today, it's also everything people can still find out that you said yesterday.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. And, with the internet, everything is there just forever. Yesterday is like always, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, we also talk a lot these days about trust and what a critical factor that is today. I mean, it always is, but especially with AI and how those tools make a judgment when they're assessing any organization. How can conflicting information affect trust, even when none of the individual errors on their own seems especially serious, an outdated bio or an outdated PDF or whatever, but kind of cumulatively, how does that conflicting information affect trust?
Yeah, I think trust is built through consistency. So if I see one small discrepancy, I might ignore it. But if the website says one thing, a PDF says something different, and a directory listing says something else entirely, I start to wonder which version is right. None of those inconsistencies may be a huge error on its own, but the problem is the pattern. It creates uncertainty, and uncertainty makes people work harder to understand you. Is, for like buyers in regulated or high trust industries, that matters. If your own information doesn't line up, they may start wondering what else doesn't line up. So the issue isn't always that outdated content is dramatically wrong. Sometimes it's just inconsistent enough to chip away at the confidence.
Yeah, that's, I think that's a really important takeaway here. So let me see if I can summarize the big ideas here on content debt overall. Basically, builds when outdated, duplicated, or conflicting materials remain available as an organization grows and evolves over time.
Mm-hmm.
AI is increasingly the risk because it can gather information from across the organization's digital footprint and even outside the organization and present all of that as one synthesized answer. Publishing more content doesn't necessarily erase what's already there because organizations also need to update, consolidate, and retire materials.
Yeah.
And essentially, the goal isn't necessarily to delete everything old, it's more to make sure that the content that remains is accurate and useful and aligned with the organization today. Did I kind of capture it?
100%.
So good. Like I said, Cindy, I really love this article. It really spoke to me on so many, like from yesterday, from today. It's a constant challenge. And I think it is one that tends to get deprioritized because it's not fun and it doesn't generate revenue, but it can certainly hurt you if it's impacting your brand. And especially today, like we talked about, how the AI platforms are assessing what they see and making judgment calls. So I thought it was great. It's a terrific topic, and I hope one that people enjoy as much as I.
Well, thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah. So for anyone listening who wants to take some action, here are a couple places to start based on Cindy's astute recommendations. First, search for your organization, not just generically, but as a customer, a journalist, a potential candidate to work for you, or a partner, the way that they would. Pay close attention to old PDFs, company descriptions, third-party profiles like directory listings, things like that, and see what you find. And then second, choose one important message, your key messages, such as your core services, products, or differentiators, and compare how it appears across your website and other materials to look for that consistency that we talked about is so important. I think it's really important to know that you don't need to solve the entire problem this week, but you do need to know what is out there and speaking for your organization.
You summed it up well.
Awesome. All right. So to learn more, I encourage you to read Cindy's full article, Content Debt, the Marketing Risk Hiding in Plain Sight, on the Edge Marketing website. You can also follow Edge Unscripted on your favorite podcast platform for more conversations about marketing, communications, AI, and business growth across legal, accounting, technology, compliance, and other regulated industries. Cindy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Jennifer. This was fun, as usual.
Thanks. And thanks to everyone listening. We'll see you next time on Edge Unscripted.
This has been Edge Unscripted. We appreciate you joining us and hope you enjoyed the conversation. Connect with us by leaving a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.